What leads a father to commit such an unthinkable act as throwing his own daughter into a frozen lake? That question echoed in the minds of many as winter imposed itself with its relentless coldness. On a quiet afternoon, under a grey sky, a little girl named Sophia felt the cold of the ice beneath her feet before being pushed into the icy waters. Despair took over his small body while his father, with a blank stare, walked away as if he were getting rid of a burden. But fate had other plans. A man named Miguel, a former history teacher who had withdrawn from society in search of answers to ancient mysteries, was nearby. He always felt out of place, lost between the pages of books and forgotten stories. When he heard the cries for help, his instinct led him to the lake. Without hesitation, he threw himself into the icy water and, with superhuman effort, managed to rescue the girl. As he held her in his arms, Miguel noticed something peculiar. A bright mark on Sophia's belly seemed to pulsate under her pale, wet skin. He was perplexed, feeling that the child was much more than a simple victim. She carried a secret that could change everything. As he warmed her in his arms, a strange connection began to form between them, as if their fates were intertwined in a way he didn't yet comprehend. Sophia, even in her state of shock, felt a surge of hope as she looked at the stranger who had saved her. He had a gentle look, but there was an intensity in his eyes that made her feel that he carried with him a story as heavy as hers. Miguel, in turn, realized that the girl's presence made his heart beat faster. He remembered his own traumas, the losses that had shaped him, and realized that he now had a new mission: to protect this child. As they walked together along a snow-covered path, Sophia began to recall moments in her life before her father's unthinkable act. She thought of her mother, who always encouraged her to dream, and how her love now seemed a distant memory. Miguel, noticing the sadness on the girl's face, decided to share a little of his own story, telling about his journeys and the lessons he learned along the way. This interaction, although simple, helped to create a bond between them, showing that, even in the midst of despair, there was room for hope and friendship. As they advanced, the atmosphere around them seemed to change. The lake, once threatening, now became a symbol of overcoming. Miguel felt the growing pressure of the dark forces that followed him, a shadow of the past that seemed determined to reclaim what he thought was his own. The man knew he needed to find out more about the mark on Sophia and what it meant. Most importantly, he needed to understand why his father had put her in such danger. With each step, life's lessons became clearer. Miguel realized that in order to save Sophia, he would need to confront his own fears and ghosts. He could no longer live only among books. There was a reality to be faced, a responsibility that was now his. And Sophia, in turn, began to realize that even in the darkest situations, it was always possible to find a light that would guide them out of the darkness. Sophia and Miguel's story had only just begun, but they already felt the strength of an unbreakable bond. Together, they would face the challenges ahead, determined to unravel the secrets that fate had in store for them. As the ice began to melt under the sun's rays, so did the fears that had previously imprisoned them, giving space for hope to be reborn. Miguel and Sophia walked slowly along the snow-covered trail, the cold still biting their wet skins. The silence of winter was broken only by the sound of footsteps crunching on the snow and the splashes of water that trickled down from Miguel's clothes. He looked at the girl's face, which was still pale, but there was now a spark of determination in her eyes. Sophia, although traumatized, began to feel safe next to the stranger who had saved her. Miguel knew that their journey was just beginning. As they walked, he couldn't help but think about what had happened, and Sophia's father. What could lead a man to commit such an act? The questions tormented him, but more than that, he had to focus on taking care of the girl before him. He looked at her and realized that despite her frailty, there was a strength within her that inspired him. This motivated him to be the best protector he could be. However, at every step, Miguel felt the pressure of his own demons. He had withdrawn from society for so long, immersing himself in old books and stories, that he now found himself confronted with the reality of a life he no longer knew how to live. The desire to hide from any responsibility was strong, but when he looked at Sophia, he felt the need to fight, to get back on his feet. The connection that was beginning to form between them was a powerful reminder that he was no longer alone. Sophia, in turn, struggled with confusion and pain. The memories of her father plagued her, and she wondered how someone who was supposed to protect her could become her tormentor. Miguel noticed her restlessness and decided to make room for her to speak. "Sophia," he said softly, "if you need to let off steam, I'm here to listen to you." She hesitated, but the genuine concern in Miguel's eyes encouraged her to share a little. "My father, he used to be so affectionate. I don't understand what happened. Why did he do that?" Her voice trembled, and Miguel felt his heart tighten. He had no answers, but he knew he needed to be a support. Sometimes people go through things that we can't understand, but that's not your fault. Miguel's words brought a little relief to Sophia's pain, but it also made her reflect. With each revelation, Miguel remembered his own traumas, the times he felt helpless and lost. He knew he needed to get back on his feet, not only for himself, but now also for Sophia. But uncertainty and fear of failure were constant in his mind. The idea that he could fail to protect the girl made him distressed. As they advanced, they found a small shelter among some trees. It was an abandoned cabin covered in snow, but still standing. Miguel decided it was a good place to rest and warm Sophia. He helped her settle in, while he himself struggled to light a small fire with the materials he found. The light and warmth of the fire began to dissipate the cold, but Miguel also felt a different warmth beginning to grow inside him, a mixture of hope and determination. Sophia watched him with gratitude and a little curiosity. "You don't look like an ordinary person," she said, breaking the silence. "Why was it so close to the lake?" Miguel smiled slightly, thinking about how he could explain his lonely life. "I used to be a history teacher. I was just trying to understand a few things about the past. But sometimes the past comes to us in unexpected ways." The girl frowned, confused. "You mean the past can take us by surprise?" Miguel nodded. "Yes, and sometimes we need to face it to move forward. Life is full of challenges, and each one of them teaches us something." He remembered his own struggle to accept his failures and start over. However, doubt still haunted him. Could he really protect Sophia and help her find her way? As night fell and the hut was filled with shadows, Michael and Sophie sat down by the fire. He decided it was time to share more of his story. "There was a time when I had big dreams, but because of some wrong choices, I lost everything. My students, my passion. I walked away from everything because I thought there was no going back." Sophia listened to him attentively, admiring his vulnerability. "But you saved me. You're strong." Miguel shook his head, a sad smile on his lips. "Strength is a complicated word. Sometimes it seems like we're always fighting against something bigger than ourselves. But you are also strong, Sophia. You survived something terrible." The conversation between them was an exchange of experiences, a construction of emotions that united them more at every moment. But deep down, Miguel still wondered if he would be able to keep Sofia safe. The memories of his own life haunted him, and he wondered if he really had what it took to be a true protector. Doubt settled in his heart, but as he looked at Sofia, he felt a flame of hope. She needed him, and somehow it gave him courage. He realized that his own journey of overcoming was linked to hers. Together they could face the approaching unknown, decide what to do with the past, and perhaps find a future worth fighting for. Miguel looked at the fire, the flames dancing and casting shadows on the walls of the cabin. The heat enveloped him, but the tension in his chest kept him restless. He couldn't help but have his mind wander to the past, to the days when he felt in control, when he had a life and a purpose. Now here he was, trying to protect a traumatized girl from a world that seemed unforgiving. Sofia was absorbed in her thoughts, her gaze lost in the flames. Miguel realized the pain that still accompanied her, the memories of her father that seemed to whisper with every crackle of the fire. He wanted to comfort her, but he didn't know how. The memory of his own loneliness prevented him from finding the right words. This feeling of helplessness consumed him. He felt that even next to her, he couldn't reach the depth of pain she carried. "Do you think we're going to be okay?" Sofia asked, breaking the silence. The vulnerability in her voice made Miguel's heart tighten. He wanted to answer with certainty, but doubts consumed him. "I hope so, Sofia. We are together, and this is already a good start." But as he said this, a part of him questioned whether this union was enough. He had no experience in caring for a child, and the responsibility seemed too heavy. As the night wore on, a strong wind began to blow outside. The sound of the wind howling through the trees sounded like a warning. Miguel looked out the fogged window and noticed that the storm was approaching. "We need to find a safer place," he said, trying to hide the panic that was beginning to build inside him. Sofia looked at him with wide eyes. "But what if my father comes back?" The mention of her father hit her like a punch in the stomach. "He won't hurt you again, Sofia, I promise," Miguel replied, though the uncertainty in his own voice left him distressed. He didn't know what to do if the man came back. Sofia's past was a shadow that could not be ignored. Her fear made him question if he was really strong enough to protect her. The storm began to roar outside, the wind crashing hard against the walls of the hut. Miguel got up and started looking for something he could use to ensure their safety. He knew that the shelter might not be enough. With each crack of the wood, his heart raced, and he felt the weight of responsibility piling on his shoulders. Meanwhile, Sofia cowered by the fire, her gaze lost. Miguel realized that even in the midst of chaos, she was fighting her own demons. He approached and crouched next to her. "Sofia, you're still with me, right?" She nodded, but he could see the doubt in her eyes. "Do you think your father is still around?" He didn't want to feed her fears, but he needed to be honest. "I don't know," she said, her voice trembling. "He can be anywhere. What if he comes back to finish what he started?" The anguish in her voice made Miguel feel helpless. He wanted to shout that everything would be fine, but the words wouldn't come out. The truth was that he himself was struggling with the fear of failure. The storm intensified, and the wind seemed to want to sweep away the hut. Miguel began to feel suffocated by the pressure. He pulled away a bit, trying to find a place where he could think. Doubt consumed him. Was he really ready to face the danger that might arise? What if it failed? What would this mean for Sofia? As he thought, an idea began to form in his mind. He needed to act, not only as a protector, but as someone who could give Sophia hope that there was a future beyond pain. I needed to show her that life could be different, that they could escape the darkness. He would return to being the teacher he once was, not only of history, but of life. With this determination, Miguel turned and approached Sophia again. Let's make a plan. We need to be prepared for anything that might happen. She looked at him, her eyes shining with a mixture of fear and hope. What do you mean? Let's train. Let's prepare for what may come. You're strong, Sophia, and I'll help you figure that out. He drew an encouraging smile, but he knew that his own insecurities still haunted him. Could he really teach someone to be strong when he himself felt so fragile? Night passed, and the storm continued outside, but inside the hut, a new flame began to glow. Miguel and Sophia were together in their struggle, and this somehow made everything more bearable. Miguel didn't have all the answers, but he was determined not to let fear overwhelm them. He decided that no matter what happened, he would not fail Sophia. If she were his responsibility, he would do whatever it took to protect her and help her find her way. The hours dragged on and the cold outside intensified, but Miguel was more aware than ever that for every step they took, there was a new chance to start over. He just needed to believe that together they could face whatever life threw at them. Michael watched the crackling fire as a storm roared outside, bringing with it a climate of uncertainty and fear. Each gust of wind seemed to echo his own doubts about his ability to protect Sophia. The flames cast dancing shadows on the walls of the cabin, reflecting the emotional turmoil that consumed him. He felt like a castaway on a stormy sea, not knowing if he would make it to shore or sink into the depths of impotence. When Sophia asked if they would be okay, he felt a pinch in his heart. The child's fragility hit him like a blow. He wanted to make sure that everything would be okay, that they were safe, but the words seemed to fade before they reached his lips. He was aware that their lives depended on their ability to lead, to offer not only physical, but also emotional security. However, his own insecurity made it increasingly difficult to take on this role. The storm intensified, and Miguel found himself overcome by the pressure. He pulled away a little, looking for a breathing space. The sound of the howling wind and the swaying trees seemed to whisper his flaws, reminding him of times when he couldn't protect those he loved. The weight of his story followed him like a shadow, and now the responsibility for Sophia seemed an unbearable burden. He remembered what a dedicated teacher he had been, someone who inspired his students to dream and fight. But where was this strong figure now? He felt small and incapable. Michael began to reflect on his own weaknesses. What had happened to his determination? Where was the faith he had once had in himself? He recalled a time in his life years ago when he had faced a similar situation. On that occasion, he had failed to protect someone who trusted him. Guilt had been with him ever since, and now, as he looked at Sophia, he feared that history might repeat itself. This memory deeply afflicted him, making him question whether he could really be a protector. In this state of confusion, an idea began to take shape in his mind. He realized that he needed to act, that he would be at the mercy of fear if he didn't take action. He needed not only to protect Sophia, but also to show her that there was hope. Miguel recalled how, in his heyday as a teacher, he had taught his students to find strength in themselves, to overcome obstacles. Now it was time to apply these lessons in your own life. With a new focus, he turned to Sophia. Let's make a plan. We need to be prepared for anything that might happen. The words came out of her mouth more firmly than she felt inside. He knew he needed to convey confidence, even if inside him there was a storm of uncertainty. Sophia looked at him, her eyes reflecting a mixture of fear and hope, as if she was seeking not only answers, but also a reason to believe that everything would be okay. She hesitated, but the determination in Miguel's eyes seemed contagious. "What do you mean?" Sophia asked, her voice carrying a tremor, but also a glint of curiosity. He smiled, a smile that he hoped conveyed reassurance. "Let's train. Let's get ready. You're strong, Sophia, and I'll help you figure that out." It was a turning point, not only for them, but also for Miguel. He realized that even in the midst of despair, there was an opportunity for growth. At that moment, Miguel realized that protecting Sophia didn't just mean keeping her out of harm's way. It also meant helping her find her own strength, face her fears, and believe she could overcome the past. He had the chance to be the mentor he always wanted to be, not just in theory, but in practice. It filled him with a new energy, a renewed determination. The wind howled outside, but inside the hut, a new flame began to glow. Miguel felt that he was redeeming himself, that he had the opportunity to transform pain into strength, not only for himself, but also for Sophia. He was ready to face the challenges that would come, not only as a protector, but as a partner in the fight for a better future. Together, they could find the hope they so desperately needed. Miguel realized that sometimes true strength lay not in being invulnerable, but in having the courage to face one's fears while inspiring others to do the same. Life could be full of uncertainty, but with Sophia by his side, he finally felt like he had a purpose again. He didn't have all the answers, but at least he had a purpose. He would decide that no matter what happened, he would not fail the girl who was now his responsibility. The shadows of the past might be long, but Miguel was determined to light the way ahead. The hours dragged on as the storm continued to roar, but inside the cabin, Miguel and Sophia came together in a new understanding. Miguel sat next to Sophia, his gaze fixed on the flames that danced in the fireplace. As the wind howled outside, he felt that this storm was, in a way, a reflection of his own inner storm. The words he had said to Sophia still resonated in his mind. "You are strong, and I will help you figure it out." But inside, doubt still consumed him. He wondered if he could really be the figure of strength he had promised. The little one looked at him expectantly, and Miguel couldn't help but notice how vulnerable she looked. The way his eyes shone in the firelight showed that despite the fear, there was a spark of hope there. Sophia needed to believe that everything would be okay, and he needed to believe too. But how could he do this if insecurity followed him like a shadow? He took a deep breath, trying to calm down. "Let's start with something simple," he said, trying to hold his ground. "How about if we make a security plan? If the storm gets stronger, we need to know what to do." Sophia nodded, her eyes lighting up. "What should we include in the plan?" She looked more confident now, and that gave Miguel a little boost of courage. He began to list the things they needed to consider, identifying the exits of the cabin, thinking about how they could communicate in case of an emergency, and even creating a signal to make themselves heard amid the noise of the storm. As he spoke, Miguel began to feel that the conversation helped him organize his own thoughts. He realized that even though the storm outside was fierce, inside the cabin, they were safe. And in that space, they could create a shelter not only physical, but emotional. "If something happens, we need to be together," said Miguel, looking at Sophia. "You must not turn away from me." He saw her eyes widen, and his heart tightened. It was an immense responsibility, but it was also an opportunity to connect. He wanted her to know that she wasn't alone, that he would be there to guide her. "You'll always be with me, right?" Sophia asked, the insecurity in her voice making Miguel feel a new tightness in his heart. "Yes, always," replied Michael, the firmness in his words now ringing more true. He realized that by reaffirming this certainty to Sophia, he was also reaffirming it to himself. The connection they shared was an anchor in the midst of chaos. The hours went by, and while the wind roared outside, Miguel and Sophia dedicated themselves to creating their plans. Between nervous laughter and moments of seriousness, Miguel began to notice that the tension in his body was slowly dissipating. With each new idea that came up, a small wave of hope formed. He remembered his classes, how he had taught his students to think critically and find creative solutions. Now he applied these lessons in his life, in the protection he offered Sophia. But even in this new focus, the shadow of his past failures still hung over him. He couldn't ignore the weight he felt in his heart, the memories of times when he wasn't able to protect those he loved. "What if I fail again?" he asked himself in a whisper, doubt creeping back into his mind. Sophie, noticing his expression, asked, "What are you thinking, Michael?" He hesitated. "Just, sometimes I worry," he admitted. It was a risk to open up, but he knew that honesty was an important part of his new role. "I've failed before, and I'm afraid it could happen again." "But you're trying now," Sophia replied, her voice soft. "You helped me have a plan. This is very important." The wisdom of a child, even in the midst of fear, made Miguel feel a warmth in his heart. He realized that instead of seeing himself as a failure, he could start to see himself as someone who was learning and getting back on his feet. As the wind continued to blow, Michael felt that this new perspective was beginning to transform him. He didn't have to be perfect. He just needed to be present and willing to try. And in doing so, she was teaching Sophia a valuable lesson about resilience and the importance of facing one's fears. That night, as the storm raged outside, Miguel and Sophia became more than just a teacher and his student. They became allies, fighting together against the fears and uncertainties that life presented to them. What once seemed like an unbearable burden now became a shared journey. And Miguel realized that while the past still haunted him, the future was full of possibilities. He smiled at Sophia, who now seemed calmer and more confident. "Let's face this together," he said, the determination in his voice rising. And as the storm continued to roar, inside the cabin, a new light began to shine, illuminating the way to a future that, though uncertain, now seemed more promising. Michael was sitting next to Sophia, both warmed by the light of the fireplace as the storm roared outside. The strong wind seemed to want to invade the cabin, but inside that cozy space, they felt protected. He looked at Sophia, who was watching the flames with a mixture of fascination and awe, and realized that this was an opportunity not only to help her, but also to help himself. "Let's start with something simple," said Miguel, deciding that this was the right time to act. "How about if we make a security plan? If the storm gets stronger, we need to know what to do." Sophia's eyes sparkled at the suggestion, and she nodded enthusiastically. "What should we include in the plan?" Her question brought a slight smile to Miguel's face, and he began to list the steps clearly and objectively. In doing so, she was not only guiding Sophia, but also organizing her own thoughts and feelings. "First, we need to identify the exits of the cabin," he began, pointing to the doors and windows. "And if the power goes out, we need to have flashlights and batteries on hand." He noticed that as he spoke, The tension in his shoulders seemed to ease. The structure of the plan offered a sense of control that he hadn't felt in a long time. Sophia, excited, began to make notes on a piece of paper that Miguel had found. "And if the storm gets too strong, we can take shelter in the bathroom, right? It's a safer part of the house," she suggested, her voice firm. "Exactly, Sophia. And we can create a signal to communicate with each other in case we can't hear each other because of the noise of the wind." Miguel felt his heart warm with her determination. He was beginning to realize that this interaction was not only an emergency plan, but also a way to build a stronger bond between them. As they argued, he began to reflect on his own past. He remembered the times when he could not protect those he loved. Insecurity still haunted him, but instead of letting it overwhelm him, he decided to use these experiences as learning. "If something happens, we need to stay together," he said, looking into Sophia's eyes. "You mustn't turn away from me." Sophia hesitated for a moment, and Miguel realized her vulnerability. "You'll always be with me, right?" she asked, her voice trembling, but full of hope. "Yes, always," replied Michael. And as he said this, he felt that he was reaffirming not only to herself, but also to himself. He was committing to face his fears, not only for Sophia, but for him as well. As they continued to work out the plan, Miguel began to realize that Sophia wasn't just learning from him. She was also teaching him. With every nervous laugh they shared, with every idea that came up, he felt a new wave of hope brewing inside him. He remembered the lessons he taught in class, how he encouraged his students to get up after each fall. Now, he was applying this in his own life. "Sometimes I worry," Miguel confessed hesitantly. "I've failed before, and I'm afraid it could happen again." He was opening up, revealing a weakness he had hitherto tried to hide. Sophie, with the wisdom of a child, replied, "But you're trying now. You helped me have a plan. This is very important." Her words resonated with Michael, making him understand that true strength was not in never failing, but in getting up and trying again. The storm outside was raging, but inside the cabin, a new understanding was beginning to blossom. He realized that his fears were natural, but they should not stop him from acting. With every small step he took, every time he talked about his insecurities, he was building a new foundation. "There will be times when we will feel fear," he said, trying to convey a new sense of resilience. "But that doesn't mean we can't find strength, even on the most difficult days." Sophia looked at him with admiration, and that made Miguel feel stronger. The night wore on, and around the fireplace they continued to talk, dream, and plan. Miguel began to see that true success was not in being perfect, but in being present and willing to face challenges. He realized that relationships like the one he was building with Sophia were what really mattered. "Let's face this together," he said, with renewed determination. And as the storm continued to roar, Miguel felt that despite the past that haunted him, the future was full of promise and possibility. He was no longer just the teacher trying to protect his student, but a man who was finally learning to protect and value himself. In the warmth of the cabin, a new light shone, illuminating the way to a future that, while uncertain, now seemed more promising than ever. Miguel and Sophia continued to plan, but the noise of the storm outside intensified. The hut trembled slightly, and each thunder seemed to resonate within them, bringing out a mixture of anxiety and anticipation. Miguel looked out the window where the rain was beating hard and felt his heart racing. The insecurity that had previously seemed controlled began to resurface, like a shadow that would not leave him alone. "Are you okay?" Sophia asked, noticing the change in her face. Her concern was palpable, and Miguel tried to smile, but the gesture was not convincing. He was about to speak, but a burst of wind made the door of the cabin creak, and a shiver ran down his spine. "We're safe here," he said, but his own voice sounded hesitant. He recalled times when he couldn't protect those he loved, memories that haunted him like ghosts. "What if something happens?" Sophie's voice was small, almost lost in the noise of the storm. She looked at him wide-eyed, and Miguel realized that the courage he had cultivated was in danger of crumbling. The mood was heavy, and the fear he had been trying to hide was now in sight. "Let's stick together," he replied, but the phrase sounded more like an empty promise than an affirmation of confidence. Miguel closed his eyes for a moment, trying to gather his strength. He needed to be strong, not just for Sophia, but for himself. The flames in the fireplace danced before them, and Miguel felt a wave of nostalgia. He recalled a day when a student of his had been injured during an activity. At that moment, he felt powerless, unable to protect him. Now the situation was similar, but there was something different. He was determined not to repeat the same mistakes. I don't want you to get hurt, Sophia," he said, his voice shaking. "What if I can't protect her?" Miguel's vulnerability hung in the air, and the storm outside seemed to echo his insecurities. Sophia, realizing the gravity of the situation, approached him. "But you're here now, and that's already a big step," she said, with a confidence that surprised Miguel. Her strength inspired him, but it also made him feel the pressure of being the protector she needed. He was fighting the storm not only from the outside, but also from within. What if I fail again?" he whispered, fear showing in his voice. "What if I can't be what you need?" Sophia took his hand, and the connection between them was instantaneous. "You don't have to be perfect, Miguel. We all have fears and weaknesses. What matters is that you're trying. This is already a start." Her words penetrated deep into his heart, and Miguel felt that the storm, both outside and inside him, was beginning to lose strength. He closed his eyes again, taking a deep breath, trying to put his insecurities aside. At that moment, a louder thunder shook the hut, and the light flickered. Miguel felt butterflies in his stomach. "What if the light goes out?" he asked, his voice sounding louder than he intended. "Then we're going to use the flashlights," Sophia replied with determination. "And if the worst happens, we will take shelter in the bathroom, as we planned, together." That, "together," echoed in Miguel's mind like a mantra. He realized that no matter how terrible the storm was, the real strength was in unity. He remembered all the times he tried to face his challenges alone, and how it led him to feel even more lost. Now, with Sophia by his side, he had the chance to rewrite his story. "You're right," he said, his voice now firmer. "We will face this together." The certainty that came from his words seemed to dispel the inner storm that tormented him. He looked at Sophia and saw not just a student, but a partner, someone who challenged him to be better, to face his fears. "I promise I'll try," he said, feeling the pressure of his own expectations, but also the freedom to accept that he didn't have to be perfect. "And if something happens, if I fail again, I'll get up and try again, just like you said." Sophia smiled, and the sparkle in her eyes was like a beacon in the darkness. "And I'll be here to help you, Miguel. Always." Miguel felt a wave of emotion. The connection that had formed between them was stronger than any storm. With every word, with every look, they built a bond that could not be broken. As the storm roared outside, Miguel decided that he would no longer let fear overwhelm him. He would face his challenges not only for Sophia, but for himself. he was learning that true strength came from being vulnerable and allowing himself to trust others. The night continued, and though the storm outside was still howling, Michael and Sophie were focused on each other. They were each other's safe haven, and together they were ready to weather any storm that life threw at them. Fighting fears, weaknesses, and uncertainty became a journey of growth and discovery, and Miguel knew he was finally on the right path. Miguel and Sophia remained together, feeling the strength of the bond they had created in the midst of the storm. The hours passed slowly as the rain continued to pound against the cabin windows, but the atmosphere between them had transformed. The fear that once overwhelmed them was now mixed with a sense of hope and determination. In the back of his mind, Miguel began to reflect on everything that had happened. He realized how, in the face of the storm, he had found the courage to be vulnerable. Before, he had always felt pressured to be strong and unwavering, but now he understood that true strength lay not in ignoring fears, but in facing them head-on. Sophia had shown him that the beauty of life was in the human connections and imperfections we all carry. As the wind howled outside, he remembered how, in moments of crisis, he had hesitated to open up to others. The fear of failure had isolated him, but there, with Sophia by his side, he felt he was finally learning to allow himself to be supported. He looked at her and saw not only a student, but a friend. Their friendship had strengthened, and Miguel realized that life was much richer when shared. "You know," he began, his voice quieter now, "I always thought I needed to have everything under control. That I needed to be the strong protector, the perfect teacher, but in fact it's vulnerability that unites us." Sophia looked him in the eyes, her gaze full of understanding. "Yes, Miguel. No one is perfect. We all have our struggles. What matters is that we are here for each other." That conversation made him think about the lessons he had learned. Miguel now understood that success was not only measured by material achievements or by the image he presented to the world. It was about the experiences we had, the relationships we built, and the support we offered and received. He felt a new perspective forming within him, one that valued the journey and not just the destination. As the storm began to subside, they sat by the fireplace and talked about the future. Miguel shared his dreams and hopes, and Sophia did the same. He remembered the student who had been injured and the pain he had felt at the time. Now he was determined to be an educator who not only taught but also listened to and supported his students, showing them that it was normal to feel fear and insecurity. "I want to help others understand that they are not alone," he said, with more conviction. "I want them to know that it's okay to fail as long as they learn from it and get back on their feet again." Sophia smiled, admiring the transformation that was happening before her eyes. "You're already doing it, Miguel. The mere fact that you are here, facing your fears, is already an example for all of us." The connection between them deepened, and Miguel began to realize that he was becoming a better version of himself, someone who accepted his flaws and allowed himself to start over. He recalled times when he had hesitated to help others, fearing that his own insecurities would hold him back. Now, he was ready to commit to change, not just for himself, but for those around him. The hours passed, and the storm outside finally began to subside. The rain, now softer, seemed to bring a new air of renewal. Miguel looked out the window and saw the first signs of light appearing on the horizon. It was a new day, and he felt that just as the storm was coming to an end, his own inner storms were also dissipating. "Let's go outside," Sophia suggested excitedly. "I want to see what's left of the storm." Michael agreed, feeling a surge of excitement. They left the hut and braved the crisp morning air. The outside world looked different, more alive. The raindrops still glistened on the leaves and the sky began to clear. Miguel took a deep breath, feeling the freedom that came from having faced his fears. "Look at that," Sophia pointed to the rainbow that loomed on the horizon. "It's as if nature is telling us that after the storm, there is always something beautiful." Miguel smiled. It was a clear sign that life was full of new beginnings. He realized that even after past failures, there was room to grow and change. The friendship he had cultivated with Sophia had become an anchor, a constant reminder that he didn't have to face challenges alone. As they walked together, Michael knew that there would still be storms ahead. However, he was now prepared to face them, not only with force, but with an open heart. The journey of personal overcoming that he had begun there, in the midst of chaos, would take him to new horizons. He felt stronger and more confident than ever, ready to embrace the future with all its ups and downs, knowing that no matter the difficulties, there would always be a light at the end of the tunnel. With the sun finally rising on the horizon, Miguel and Sophia walked side by side, their footsteps soft on the wet grass. He looked up at the sky and remembered how the storm had changed not only the landscape, but also his way of looking at life. The rainbow that now formed above them seemed to symbolize this transformation, a promise that after every challenge, there was always a new opportunity. In the months that followed that stormy night, Miguel dedicated himself to putting into practice everything he had learned. He began to approach his life and his work as an educator in a different way. Instead of just transmitting knowledge, he started to listen more to his students, to understand their stories and challenges. He realized that each of them carried their own storms, and that being a teacher meant also being a support, a beacon in the midst of darkness. The friendship with Sophia blossomed. Together they organized a support group at the school, where students could share their experiences and insecurities. Miguel saw the impact this had on the school community. Students who had previously felt alone began to open up, bond, and support each other. The classroom that was once just a learning space has become an environment of welcome and empathy. Over time, Miguel realized that his own limitations were dissipating. He didn't have to be the perfect teacher. Instead, it could be an imperfect human being, someone who was willing to learn from his failures. This shift in mindset not only helped him connect better with his students, but also encouraged him to pursue new interests and passions outside of the classroom. He started writing a blog where he shared his reflections on life, education, and the importance of vulnerability. His words resonated with many people, and he began to receive messages of encouragement and gratitude. Miguel was surprised to realize that by exposing his own struggles, he was touching the lives of others. This new way of expressing herself brought her a sense of renewed purpose. Miguel's journey led him to understand that true success was not only measured by academic achievements or professional recognition, but by the ability to positively impact the lives of those around him. He felt fulfilled as he saw his students developing, learning to embrace their own imperfections and support each other. The twinkle in their eyes as they shared their stories was the reward he had always sought. And it was not only at school that Miguel saw changes. In his personal life, he has allowed himself to build deeper relationships. She learned to open her heart not only to Sophia, but also to friends and family. He began to value simple moments, such as a coffee with a friend or a conversation with a distant relative. Connections that once seemed superficial were now deep and meaningful. Reflecting on everything he went through, Miguel realized that life was made of ups and downs. Each challenge brought a lesson, and each failure was an opportunity to start over. He learned to look back not with sadness, but with gratitude, recognizing that every obstacle had shaped the person he was today. This acquired wisdom helped him face new challenges with courage, knowing that the journey never ended. The friendship that blossomed between him and Sophia was one of the most precious achievements. Not only did she support him during the storm, but she also became a partner in life's journey. Together, they continued to push each other, explore new horizons, and dream together. Miguel felt that this connection was one of the most beautiful expressions of what it means to live, to be present for the other, to share moments, and to grow together. Now, as he looked to the future, Miguel was filled with hope. He knew the storms might come back, but he also knew he had the tools to weather them. Life, with all its nuances, was a gift, and he was determined to make the most of it. He pledged to continue learning, to be an example of resilience, and to inspire others to do the same. And so Miguel walked a new path with an open heart and a mind full of possibilities. He had learned that true strength came not from being invulnerable, but from accepting his weaknesses and using them to connect with others. Life was a journey of overcoming, and he was ready to embrace every step, every fall, and every new beginning. The rainbow in the sky was a reminder that after the storm, there would always be beauty waiting. Michael looked up at the sky, now clear and radiant, and felt that the storm had left an indelible mark on his soul. He and Sophia stopped to observe the rainbow that stretched majestically in front of them. It was as if nature itself was celebrating the new phase of their lives. Next to Sophia, Miguel felt a wave of gratitude. His journey had not been easy, but each challenge faced, each fall, brought with it valuable lessons. "Have you ever stopped to think about how it all started?" Sophia asked, with a smile on her face. "I remember those nights when you felt lost, not knowing how to help your students." "Yes," Michael replied, looking up at the rainbow. "The storm made me realize that sometimes we have to go through difficulties to really see the light. I learned that true education goes beyond the walls of the classroom. It's about creating connections, listening to stories, and being a genuine support for those around us." Sophia nodded, remembering how the support group at school had changed the dynamic among the students. That room, which was once just a space to learn content, now pulsated with life, laughter, and sharing. Miguel always supported her, but from the beginning of that journey, she also felt empowered. Their friendship had solidified, transforming into a partnership that transcended challenges. "Look at us," she said, with a twinkle in her eye. "Look how we can impact the lives of so many people just by being ourselves." Miguel smiled, feeling that her words were true. "And that's just the beginning, Sophia. It's not about being perfect, but about being authentic. Each failure, each new beginning shapes us and brings us even closer to who we really are." He thought about the difficulties he faced. The insecurities that once paralyzed him were now fuel for his determination. He understood that success was not only measured by material achievements or recognition, but by the ability to transform lives. Miguel had become an educator and a friend who believed in the power of shared stories. "Do you remember that student who had such a hard time opening up?" Sophia asked. "Now she is one of the most involved in the group. It's amazing to see how people can change when they feel supported." "Yes," Miguel said, moved. "She is a perfect example. Sometimes all we need is a little love and understanding. That can make all the difference." As they walked, Miguel couldn't help but feel like he was about to enter a new phase of his life. He realized that even if the storms could return, he had the tools he needed to weather them. The path ahead of him was uncertain, but with Sophia's friendship by his side, he felt prepared for any challenge. However, in the midst of his reflections, something supernatural happened. An intense light began to shine in the clouds, and a soft wind began to blow, as if nature itself was responding to Michael's transformation. He felt a presence around him, a sense that he was not alone in this journey. Sophia looked at Miguel with a puzzled face. Do you feel that? Like something is changing around us? Yes, he replied, looking up at the sky. It's as if life is showing us that when we open ourselves to love and vulnerability, we are guided by a greater force. Thus, in that magical moment, Miguel and Sophia felt that their journey was being recognized for something greater. They knew that even if life presented new challenges, there would always be a purpose behind every difficulty. The real strength was in allowing yourself to be vulnerable and connecting with others. Let's continue this journey together, Miguel said, looking into Sophia's eyes. Let's help more people find their strength, open up, and connect with their stories. Yes, Sophia smiled, certainly in her heart. Together we can make a difference. By looking at the rainbow, Miguel and Sophia understood that life was a continuous cycle of challenges and victories. And most of all, they learned that there would always be a new dawn after the storm. Now we invite you to reflect on your own storms and the lessons they brought. How can you use your experiences to impact the lives of someone around you? Share your stories in the comments and let's build a space of support and empathy together. If you like this story and want more stories that inspire and transform, like and subscribe to the channel. Your interaction is essential so that we can continue to bring content that touches the heart and promotes change. Don't miss the chance to be part of this journey